When you breathe through your nose, you get about 18 times more oxygen through your nose compared to breathing through your mouth. It also stimulates your vagus nerve, stimulates your diaphragm, so it's literally proper airflow, and it's critical for sleep. Ever since I started tracking my sleep, and on days where I don't tape my mouth shut, bad. Days I do tape my mouth shut, good. What's crazy though is that on days where I shouldn't get good sleep, or that should be like I'm at the low of 50, I tape my mouth shut, and I'm still in like the 70s, 80s, 90s, and that's my bad day. Literally the one thing I did was just strict time when I start sleeping, strict time when I wake up, and then tape my mouth shut. That's like.
You try to change strap?
I have not, but that's good for especially people who have sleep apnea or chronic, like centralized sleep apnea, just because there's potential for when we sleep, everything kind of relaxes and it's almost like induced paralysis, but your tongue has the potential to actually obstruct, and so with sleep apnea cases, there is a risk of aspiration, fluid trying to get out. And if your mouth is taped shut, you're not going to be able to get it out. But if you're able to having like a shoelace or something, almost tied and keeping it shut, then you can just kind of rip it off and
what do you tape it with? What kind of tape?
Scotch tape. I have the roll and I just put it on.
Paint tape is better though. Try that.
What kind?
Paint tape.
Sweet,
Oh,
yeah. So sleep schedule is big because that regulates hormones. That's the big thing, and also your circadian rhythm. So circadian rhythm is crucial. Part of the reason why in the mornings I like to get morning sunrise or morning sunlight, because that starts pretty much my clock for hormones. It also starts my clock for temperature. So taking a cold shower in the morning, that also starts your temperature clock because our body heats up early in the day. That's when we're working hard, that's when we're active, and then as the day continues on, by the end of the day, we actually internally lower our temperatures because we're starting to get primed for sleep. So turning down the temperature when we sleep is also critical.
like down to what?
I keep my house at 66.
Oh.
Yeah.
It helps.
Yep.
It does?
Yeah.
Helps to regulate
Energy loves me.
everything.
Yeah, energy, me and energy are like this. Yep. She's awesome.
Even in the winter.
I'm actually,
Oh, wow.
yeah,
60
I'm excited to
feet
put my
tall,
daughter down.
66,
I wasn't able to put her down yesterday.
It helps. With
No,
this.
I love.
That's great. And one thing that I've noticed personally, just through tracking my sleep, so one of the big things that I track is my heart rate variability. That's another measure of autonomic nervous system function, similar to what we do in our office. And on the days where let's say, the mornings where I look at the app and I check my sleep and my heart rate variability is high. High heart rate variability is good. That's a good thing, it means there's not a lot of stress in my system. What I've done that night before is typically I don't eat 3 hours before bed. Literally when I do that, my heart rate variability is like skyrocketed. And when I do take in things, whether it be just food or even tea too, 3 hours before bed, my heart variability is down. It's because my system is still actively processing stuff while I'm supposed to be not doing anything.
Okay, so one second, we're pause on that. I drink tea at night.
Yeah.
Is that a no-no now?
Well, just
Yeah.
Play with it.
Oh,
So what I did was I just started having my dinners earlier.
okay.
Like I have an eating window too, and then
Yeah.
my last meal I have tea. Like I'm having my ginger tea, I'm having my digestive tea, I'm doing that. But the issue was when I was having like my 9 p.m. kind of one.
That's when I started. Dang it.
Well, we just
Just try it
That's
out.
not good.
And yeah, you notice you might actually function better with it.
Yeah. So these are just some things that help with sleep. But magnesium, I personally know that magnesium and GABA.
Magnesium is huge.
Yeah.
So depleted from our foods.
What's
Yep.
GABA?
Yeah.
GABA's good too.
Yep. So
What is
GABA,
that?
it's a neurotransmitter.
Yeah,
So it's another like signaler, and it helps relax everything. So
I've not heard
it's
of that.
it's like an inhibitor for our system. So it really just kind of calms
It's a
everything
supplement.
down. It can be. And
Can
it's
be.
also contained in foods too.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yep.
Yeah. Any questions on this stuff? You guys get any good nuggets out of this?
Yeah, it's all great.
Some approaches.
okay. I was listening to somebody, and they were saying in the summertime that our hours should be. Shoot, I may be confused. 10 to 6, in the wintertime, 9 to 5. I guess because of the time change.
I saw that.
Oh, you seen
I
that?
saw it, yeah.
And they were saying that should be your, and then, you know, you should get up first thing, of course, don't get on any, and go out to the sunlight.
Yep.
And
Oh,
extra,
Huberman, okay.
you know,
Was it Huberman?
no,
It wasn't?
Who we trust.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
what,
Because Andrew, right? Andrew
Yeah.
Huberman. He's really big into that. Essentially, and to be honest, the biggest thing to really get out of this workshop is we tend to hear, you know, we need 8 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
Or we need 7 hours of sleep. The reality is every single person is so different. Every single person is so different. You know, I function really well off around 6-7 hours. My wife functions really well. She needs about 8 to 9. I function really well if I don't sleep past 6 o'clock, even on the weekends. Like, if I don't sleep past 6, I'll function really well. My wife, she tends to work really well if she wakes up around 7. So it's just establishing and finding, you know, that's why we love tracking our sleep, because it's so critical, because then we have objective data to see how well it's doing. But yeah, every single person is really, really different. Whether we sleep from 9 to 5 or whether we sleep from 10 to 6, that could play a portion of it, especially with the time change. The biggest takeaway to get from that would be essentially if you typically go to bed at 10 o'clock during the winter, try to go to bed around, or I know if you go to bed around 9 o'clock during the winter, just try to go to bed around, what would that be, 10 o'clock in the
Yeah.
summers. Yep.
yeah, okay. And they were saying to exercise first thing before you eat.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so
And drink water.
my
Yeah, and drink
like
water.
the
Get up,
yep.
drink a cup of water or two, and then exercise.
Yeah, so the first thing that I do when I wake up is brush my teeth, fill my hydro, and I'm gonna go for an outside walk, where I mix in some body weight stuff too, or I just do a workout on my balcony. So I'm pretty much doing that every single morning. It's one or the other.
And what's y'all's thoughts on, like, I forget what they call it, where you go really hard for like 45 seconds or a minute?
HIIT training, high intensity interval training.
Yeah, and then you rest for 30 seconds, and then you go really hard for 45 seconds, and rest.
It has its perks. I
And they
did
say you only have to exercise 15 minutes a day, like
Yeah.
on a rebound.
That's more of
or
like
something.
that would be more of like an exercise. Maybe we'll host an exercise workshop.
Oh,
That'd
okay.
be
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah. So that's more exercise. It would impact sleep, but yeah, we'll talk about doing an exercise workshop. We can answer that question.
That'd
For
I'll
sure.
be happier.
Oh yeah.
That'd be awesome, yeah. So we're gonna go through this kind of back half of this stuff pretty quick to make sure that we're getting everybody back home at a good time.
To be able to go to sleep.
If you wanna go to sleep, it's a big deal. I actually have to go buy groceries and meal prep, so my Wednesday nights are gonna be a big
Uh-oh,
deal.
you're not gonna be in bed by 9.
Yeah, Brian, I understand that on Wednesdays I sacrifice that.
And we'll make sure that we have all of your emails, so we'll make sure that we'll email you the slides as well. But yeah, we'll finish up.
So big question. So I mean, you've been kind of asked this question: how the heck can your guys' stuff help sleep? So really, this care is for when you've already tried all of these kind of these approaches and more, and nothing works. Right? So it's like, hey, I'm doing all these things that's being recommended, all the stuff I'm reaching out on Google and YouTube, and nothing still works. Well, what's inhibiting that? So that's where this stuff kind of comes into play. So with that, these big four. Or blood flow is a big deal. Like I mentioned in one of the second slides, I think, where it was talking about impaired cerebral circulation is a consequence of sleep, of poor sleep. It's also a consequence, or it's also the cause of poor sleep. In which case, the blood flow that's getting to our brain has to travel through the first and second vertebra in our neck. And so if there's any kind of misalignment or rotation factor, it's actually kinking this blood flow. And so it's almost like kinking a hose. And so if I'm not getting enough blood flow to my brain can't store oxygen and it can't store glucose, but it uses up over 60% of both of those for my entire body. And so it's asking, hey, I need this stuff. I'm not able to get it. How can I get more of it? I'm going to ramp up my blood pressure. I'm going to ramp up my heart rate. I'm going to ramp up the hormones that are allowing for blood to flow through better, which is why we end up getting stuck in that chronic stressed out state for potentially decades at a time. Now the same concept, in terms of venous insufficiency, that's talking about blood flow being able to drain out, and it travels through the same bones. So if those vessels are also kinked up, then I'm going to have difficulty draining blood out, in which case it's going to stagnate. I'm not going to be able to clear waste out. I'm not going to be able to bring nutrients in. It just creates this stagnant pool of not very useful blood.
And then with cerebral spinal fluid, CSF flow is essentially essential for nourishing the spinal column, right? And so if we have deficiencies in our cerebral spinal fluid regulation, that could also cause to a lack of sleep because our body's not effectively able to nourish the system that controls it all. Brainstem pressure, that's what we have to be able to analyze and see is exactly, is there something going on that's actually impeding the brainstem's ability to function at 100%? And then neuronal connections, obviously there's different neuronal connections inside of our brain that are responsible for making all these different connections and patterns. One of those patterns being, hey, I need to go to bed, right? Or hey, I'm actually hungry. And so when we have all these different neuronal connections that are also being impeded as a result of everything else, this will actually inhibit our ability to have effective thought process regulations, which is why we see good things with prefrontal cortex changes under care. Our ability to be able to process our food regularly, because if the neuronal connections are not connecting, then the body doesn't actually know what signals to send to help regulate the food that we're eating. Same signals for sleep, telling us to go to sleep. And so all of this is a cascading snowball, essentially toppling over each other for us to be able to know, is there something that's actually impeding with the body's ability to sleep from a more functional perspective.
Yeah, when there's any kind of pressure on the brainstem, it perceives that as stress, which turns on sympathetic. Like how we talk about that automatic, sympathetic, parasympathetic. It's literally gonna perceive it as stress, which means we're automatically getting filtered to the sympathetic side. We can't switch back. That's when people are having a tough time. I can't fall asleep, can't stay asleep when I wake up. My thoughts start going. I'm waking up with brain fog because I didn't sleep good. It's because we're not able to actively, positively, correctly switch to this sleep, rest, digest mode. It's because we're stuck in the sympathetic because there's issues going on in terms of pressure on my brainstem, also leading to all these other things too. So that's actually a pretty significant deal. Now in terms of, those are the effects, what causes that? That's misalignment of the upper cervical system, which then leads to dysfunction at the level, at the level of the central nervous system, which governs everything. But then how does that end up happening? Really, that's three big things. It's going to be chemical stressors, so what we eat, what we drink, maybe even what we breathe. Emotional stressors, so that can be any kind of traumatic event, family, friends, things going on at work, that can actually stress out my system because I'm perceiving it as stress.